Welcome to the beginning of the journey of a king. If this is your first step with us, thank you for joining. For those returning, let us walk together through the sunlit hills of Bethlehem, where a shepherd's quiet life hums with the simplicity of tending his flock. But what happens when the ordinary collides with the extraordinary? How does a boy, unnoticed by the world, capture the gaze of the divine? What secrets lie in the anointing oil poured on David's head? This is not just the story of a shepherd. It is the start of a journey that will change the course of history.
The hills of Bethlehem awakened slowly, bathed in the golden light of dawn. The morning air carried the scent of dew and wildflowers, a soft breeze rustling through the grasses like the whispers of angels. The sheep, scattered across the hillside, stirred lazily, their bleating blending with the symphony of birds welcoming the day. I stood among them, my staff firmly in hand, scanning the horizon as I always did. My feet were rooted in the soil, yet my mind often wandered beyond the fields. The life of a shepherd was simple, some would say dull, but to me it was sacred. Each sunrise felt like a gift, each blade of grass a testament to God's provision. The flock trusted me, and I knew them all by name. I guided them to still waters, to green pastures, always watchful for danger. Wolves and lions lurked in the shadows, their presence a constant reminder that even in the beauty of creation, threats could not be ignored. My sling, a simple tool, had become my weapon against these predators, a silent partner in my duty to protect. Yet, on this morning, there was a strange stillness in the air, a weight I couldn't quite name. The sun seemed to linger on the horizon, its rays stretching farther than usual, as if reaching for something unseen. I felt it in my chest, a stirring, a question. Why me? Why here? The village of Bethlehem lay just beyond the hills, its homes quiet, but not yet lifeless. From where I stood, I could see smoke rising from chimneys as families began their day. Women carried water from the well, and the faint sound of hammers on wood echoed through the valley. It was a place of routine, of simple joys and struggles, yet I often felt as though I was waiting for something bigger than sheep or fields or the quiet life I had always known. My heart lifted as I hummed a melody, one I had crafted during nights under the stars. The notes came unbidden, flowing like a prayer from my lips. They spoke of gratitude, of longing, of trust in a God who had always provided. Even as I sang, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life was about to change. This is where my story begins, not in palaces or among warriors, but here in the quiet hills of Bethlehem. My name is David, and though I did not yet know it, my journey was already written in the heavens. I remember the hills of Bethlehem, how the sunrise would stretch across the land, painting the rocks and pastures in warm golden hues. Those hills were my world, a place of peace, yet always carrying the weight of something greater, something unseen. Each day began the same, with the familiar bleating of my sheep and the gentle rustle of the wind. But beneath the surface, life in Israel was anything but simple. Our land was beautiful, yes, but it was a land of struggle. My father Jesse often spoke of the promise God made to our people, a land flowing with milk and honey. Yet the fields we worked in were often hard and unyielding. The Philistines were a constant threat, their raids striking fear into even the bravest hearts. At night, when the stars were our only light, my father would tell us stories of old, of Moses parting the sea and Joshua's victories. His voice carried both pride and longing. As a shepherd, I learned early that vigilance was life. Wolves and lions were never far, always watching, waiting for a moment of weakness. My staff became an extension of myself, my sling a trusted companion. There were times when fear gripped me, a shadow moving in the distance, a low growl at night, but I would close my eyes and whisper a prayer. The Lord is my shield, my refuge in the face of danger. But it wasn't just the fields or the predators that shaped me. It was the people, the way they carried hope, even in the face of hardship. My brothers were strong and bold, always eager to prove themselves. They talked of battles and kings, of the glory they believed Israel deserved. Yet, as I listened, I wondered if they truly understood what it meant to lead, to carry the burden of a nation's hopes. There were nights when I sat alone under the stars, my harp resting in my lap. I would play, not for anyone else, but for the Lord. The notes carried my prayers, my questions, and my longing to understand His plan. Why had He created me, a simple shepherd, in this time, in this place? The stars seemed to whisper back, their light a reminder of His promises. I didn't have the answers, but I felt His presence, guiding me, preparing me for something I could not yet see. Life in Israel was hard, but it was also sacred. Every challenge, every moment of fear or triumph felt like part of a greater story. I didn't know then what role I would play, but I knew this: I would trust Him. Whether in the fields of Bethlehem or wherever He might lead me, I would follow His call. Life as a shepherd was both unassuming and profound. It was a role often overlooked, seen as mundane by those who passed by. Yet it required a heart attuned to care and courage. For me, every day brought challenges that demanded vigilance, patience, and trust in God. The sheep were more than just a flock. They were lives entrusted to me. Each one had its own quirks, its own needs. There was a lamb that always lagged behind, its legs still unsure of the terrain. Another was bold, always wandering too far, tempting the dangers of the wild. My duty was to guide them, to know their strengths and weaknesses, and to protect them when the shadows of predators loomed near. The hills of Bethlehem, though beautiful, were unforgiving. Rocks jutted out of the earth like jagged teeth, and the valleys below often echoed with the distant growls of lions. Wolves would circle the pastures at dusk, their eyes gleaming with hunger. I had faced them before, my sling and a simple prayer my only defense. The first time I struck down a lion, my hands trembled, not with fear, but with awe at how God had given me the strength. It wasn't my skill or courage, it was His protection. Yet, being a shepherd was not just about battles. It was about quiet moments, the kind that stretched under the vast expanse of sky. The sun would dip low on the horizon, painting the hills in hues of amber and crimson. I would sit with my harp, its wooden frame weathered from years of use, and let the melodies flow. They were songs of gratitude, of wonder, of faith that held me steady through the uncertainties of life. Often I would look up at the stars and wonder if God was listening. Shepherding also taught me humility. I wasn't just guiding the sheep, I was learning from them. Their trust and their innocence reminded me of what it meant to depend fully on God. When they strayed, I would search tirelessly, bringing them back to the fold. Each return was a small victory, a reminder of how God never abandons His own. This life, though simple, shaped me in ways I didn't yet understand. It taught me strength in stillness, bravery in the face of danger, and a deep, abiding faith that would carry me through trials I could not yet imagine. I didn't know it then, but every step I took in those fields, every song I sang under the stars, was preparing me for something far greater, a purpose beyond anything I could dream. To the world I was just a shepherd, but to me, these fields were a sanctuary, a place where I learned to listen, not just to the wind or the cries of my flock, but to the voice of God Himself. The day Samuel came to our village was unlike any other. The air itself seemed heavier, as if it carried the weight of something unseen. I was out in the fields, as usual, leading the sheep to graze, unaware of the momentous event unfolding back home. The sun was high, its heat wrapping around me, but even then, a strange unease prickled at the edges of my thoughts. When my father's servant arrived, he was breathless. "David," he called, "your father summons you." His words were urgent, almost hurried. I felt a jolt of confusion. Why would my father call me from the fields? My brothers were the ones who belonged at home, the ones who carried themselves with the strength and pride befitting sons of Jesse. I was just the youngest, a shepherd. I left the flock in the care of another and followed the servant. Each step felt heavier than the last, my mind racing with questions. When I reached our home, the sight stopped me in my tracks. There stood Samuel, the prophet of God, a man whose presence was commanding yet wrapped in an unspoken kindness. He looked at me as though he could see through to my very soul. My brothers stood nearby, their faces a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. Eliev, tall and imposing, looked at me with his usual air of superiority. "This is the one?" I heard him murmur under his breath. I lowered my gaze, suddenly aware of the dust on my tunic and the scratches on my arms from the thorn bushes in the fields. Samuel said nothing at first. He simply studied me, his eyes intense but not unkind. Then, with a nod, he stepped forward, opening the horn of oil he carried. The silence was deafening as he poured the oil over my head. Its warmth trickled down, and in that moment I felt it, a presence unlike anything I had ever known. It was as if the heavens themselves whispered, "You are chosen." I wanted to speak, to ask what this meant, but the words caught in my throat. My brothers stood in stunned silence, their disbelief turning to something I couldn't quite name. Envy, perhaps, or confusion. My father's face was unreadable, his eyes fixed on Samuel as if searching for answers. Samuel finally spoke, his voice steady and sure. "The Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." His words were heavy with meaning, yet they brought a strange peace to my racing thoughts. Afterward, Samuel left as quietly as he had come. My family returned to their tasks, and I was sent back to the fields. The sheep greeted me with their familiar bleating, unaware of the change that had just taken place. The oil still clung to my hair, its fragrance a reminder of what had occurred. As I sat under the shade of an olive tree, my harp resting in my lap, I tried to make sense of it all. Why me? What did it mean to be chosen by God? The stars began to appear, one by one, their light steady and unchanging. I felt a whisper in my heart, not an answer, but an assurance. Trust in the Lord. And so I did. even as the questions lingered, waiting for the day when I would understand. The oil was warm as it ran down my forehead, its scent earthy and sweet, lingering in the air between us. Samuel's hand was steady, yet his eyes held something unspoken, a weight, a knowing. I knelt before him, the youngest of my brothers, a boy from the fields, and yet here I was, chosen. The moment felt both surreal and sacred. I could hear my brothers shifting uneasily behind me, their whispers barely audible. Eliabe's voice broke through, low and sharp. "Surely there's been a mistake." His words stung, but I kept my gaze on the ground, humbled by what was happening. My father's silence was heavier than the words of my brothers. I dared not look at him. Samuel's voice was firm but kind. "The Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." The words sank deep, echoing in the stillness of my mind. My heart raced, not from fear, but from a stirring I couldn't yet name. As the oil continued to flow, I felt something shift within me. It was as if the very air had changed, thick with an unseen presence. It wasn't heavy, but it was powerful. A weight that steadied rather than crushed. The whispers of my brothers faded into the background, and for a moment, there was only silence, save for the beating of my heart and the soft murmur of Samuel's prayers. I thought of the fields, of the sheep that awaited me, of the nights spent under the stars. What did it mean to be chosen, to be anointed? Was I to be a king? The questions swirled, yet beneath them was a quiet assurance. I didn't need to understand it all now. I simply needed to trust. When Samuel finished, he stood back, looking at me with a small, knowing smile. "You are chosen," he said, his voice low but resolute. He turned and walked away, leaving me with my family, who seemed to avoid my gaze. My brothers returned to their tasks, their laughter forced, their movements stiff. My father lingered, his expression unreadable, before placing a hand on my shoulder. "Go back to the sheep, David," he said, softly, almost apologetically. And so I did. The fields welcomed me as they always had, the sheep bleating in recognition, but everything felt different. The staff in my hand felt lighter, the air around me more vibrant, the oil still clung to my hair. It sent a constant reminder of what had transpired. I picked up my harp and began to play, the notes flowing unbidden, a melody that seemed to rise not from my fingers but from the depths of my soul. I played for the Lord, my prayers interwoven with the music, my heart lifted in gratitude and wonder. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the hills with shades of gold and crimson, I looked to the heavens. The stars blinked into existence, steady and eternal, and I felt it again, that whisper, that presence. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew one thing. I was no longer just a shepherd. I was David, the anointed, chosen by God for something far greater than myself. The fields were quiet as the day came to an end. The sun dipped behind the hills, leaving a glow that lingered on the horizon like a farewell embrace. The sheep settled into the soft grasses, their movements slowing as night approached. I sat beneath an old olive tree, my harp resting in my lap, the weight of the day pressing gently on my shoulders. The oil Samuel had poured over my head still clung to my hair, its faint fragrance mingling with the earthy scent of the fields. The moment replayed in my mind, the steady hand of the prophet, the solemn silence of my family, and the words that had been spoken, "You are chosen." What did it mean to be chosen by God? The question lingered, unanswered, yet it no longer filled me with fear. Instead, it carried a sense of wonder, of anticipation. I ran my fingers over the strings of my harp, letting a soft melody drift into the evening air. Each note felt like a prayer, rising to the heavens, carried on the whispers of the wind. I played for the Lord, my heart full of gratitude for the life I had been given, for the fields that had taught me faith and perseverance, and for the unknown journey that lay ahead. The stars began to appear one by one, their light steady and unchanging, a reminder of God's eternal presence. I lifted my gaze to the heavens, the vast expanse above filling me with a sense of both insignificance and purpose. Here, under this sky, I was simply David, a shepherd, a son, a servant of the Lord. Yet, deep within, I felt the stirrings of something greater. The fields, the sheep, the solitude. They had been my training ground, teaching me lessons I didn't yet fully understand. I was being prepared, shaped by the unseen hand of God for a destiny I couldn't yet grasp. The night deepened, and the cool air wrapped around me like a cloak. I closed my eyes, letting the stillness settle in my heart. Whatever lay ahead, I would trust in the Lord. He had brought me to this moment, and I knew He would guide me through whatever was to come. This was just the beginning. My life as a shepherd would continue for now, but in my heart, I knew I was no longer just a boy tending sheep. I was David, chosen by God, and my journey was only beginning.
As this first chapter ends, we leave David tending his flock, anointed yet still unaware of the incredible journey ahead. What lies beyond the quiet fields of Bethlehem? How will this young shepherd rise to meet his divine calling? If this chapter inspired you, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who needs a reminder of how God can call anyone to greatness. And make sure you subscribe to God's story so you don't miss the next step in David's journey.